Great. Thanks, Sudeep, and great to be at NPC 2021, world class from India. I think we're having a lovely few days with great speakers. We have a session here that's going to focus on subscription. And to focus on subscription, I think one of the key factors is payments. And we're seeing a lot of different views based on the recent activity in India, especially with payments. So to talk about this, I think we have two very interesting speakers. One is Parthiban, who represents Chargebee. And who doesn't know Chargebee when it comes to payments? He's a senior product manager at Chargebee, and he's taking care of one of the core modules that is payments. So Parthiban has about 7+ years of product management experience across various sectors. So he's a force to reckon with, and we have him here today to give us a point of view coming from a product company, coming from the payments sort of side of things. He's going to be talking through a few things. So great to have you here, Parthiban.
Thanks, Arjun.
Great.
Happy to see you all here. Yeah.
Fantastic. And the next speaker is another lens that we wanted to have at this session to talk about payments and obviously about the regulation and compliance coming in. We have Gautam Ganjawala from AZB and Partners. And again, AZB and Partners is a name brand to reckon with in terms of compliance and legal. So we have a lot of experience coming in about regulation and compliance from his side. He's going to be talking through his lens, where he represents banks, mutual funds, portfolio investors, and has a sense of what has been happening very close to the market. So I think at one level we're going to have the opportunity to tap into his point of view from a legal standpoint, obviously observing disclaimers on what works and what doesn't work in a very valid sense. But great to have you here, Gautam, and participate in this session.
Thanks, Arjun.
Great. Now, to just kick this off, I think the first area that we're going to talk through is the new recurring payments rules that have come into effect in October 2021, right? And all of us have been seeing what kind of change it has brought in, positive, negative feedback, points of view. And I think one of the things that we have been talking through in the recent past, over the last 2 months, is what is this, resolution regarding and sort of relating to subscription payments? How is it going to affect the payment services industry? So Gautam, I'm going to open this up by throwing this question to you and sort of seeking your point of view.
Sure, thanks, Arjun. So just to give you a sense, I think I am a partner at AZB and Partners. One of my core practice areas is fintech and the payment space, which is what is the practice area more relevant to this session. I think as far as this is a very new topic and a hot trending topic, but I think the first point to make is this fairly old RBI circular. So the recurring payment circular is actually a 2019 circular, which I think got deferred for implementation to March 31st, 2021. And on the that same day, on March 31st, 2021, RBI extended it to September 30th, 2021. So I I think to put it mildly, it has caused some amount of ripples because of the headaches of having to redo the AFA and some of the other pain points which I'll talk about briefly. But I think just to articulate the point is that when industries really come back to the RBI and talked about the fact that this is very inconvenient, will lead to transaction drop-offs, customer drop-off, etc. I think the deputy governor recent speech made the point that there's a persistent tendency to complain about customer-friendly initiatives. And I think the short point from the RBI really is that you suffer the short-term pain for the long-term gain. And the title of the session is "Payment by Subscription is here to stay." I think what RBI is also saying is that their recurring payment circular is also here to stay. So with that, I think I'll maybe talk through a few of the. I don't want to bore you with the full extent of the circular, but I'll talk through the key 2 or 3 of the key requirements of the circular just to give you a snapshot of
Sure.
what is really required. And October 1, 2021, I think the most relatable common example is you all would have all got SMSs from Netflix saying that your account is no longer supported unless you go and do your additional factor of authentication and get the e-mandate done. So the critical change really is that for a card-based subscription that you would have done, you would have to redo the AFA by doing one transaction with the additional factor authentication, which in simple terms just means the OTP that you do for a card transaction and set up the mandate. The other requirements that are required as far as the circular is concerned is every time your payment or your recurring payment is due 24 hours prior, the customer is supposed to receive a message that it's going to be debited. And also an opt-out facility needs to be provided to the customer such that he can cancel the debit. I,
Got it.
the feedback I have, and there is arguably whether this was required or not, because I don't think this was an area where there was a host of customer complaints. So there's been kind of talk about whether this should have even come into place, because you're in effect trying to solve a problem that didn't exist. What from other quarters I've heard is that the key problem was really those very specific use cases of that free look period type of softwares, where you got 30 days free, after which unless you go proactively and cancel, it starts charging your card. So they had got some amount of complaints on that specific model, but not it was not a case of so the one view is that something so prescriptive and something so detailed is trying to solve a problem that maybe didn't exist in the true sense. So I think these are the key challenges. The way what it requires for it to solve is there are many players in the ecosystem that have to be ready, and the infrastructure needs to be ready for this, which includes, so while they place the onus of this compliance on acquiring banks, all the issuers also need to be ready. And what my understanding at least is that the larger merchants have now somewhat stabilized and managed to find through the aggregator solutions, etc., where they've tied up with all the issuer banks on, they've managed to stabilize transactions and they are going forward. And so I think the short point is it's here to stay. There are a few areas where possibly there is a use case for a representation to be made. I'll just touch upon one or two of them. uh, After this stabilizes and after we accept the fact that we have to go down this path, one constraint is really the 5,000 rupee cap for recurring payment transactions, specifically in the context where, when you say subscription, everything is a subscription, you will have a B2B play, which 5,000 rupees is peanuts for. Similarly, I was talking to somebody in banking, and they are saying that another key segment to solve for is the insurance sector, because very often 95% of premiums will be over 5,000. So to the extent that e-mandates on credit cards are being used now, those will have fall offs, and that will have its own consequences. So those are areas where logically representations are something that can be made. And just the last thing I want to talk about very briefly is, I think the other key big item in payments, which a lot of people are concerned about, is the RBI mandate for all payment processors, merchants to purge card data. So in effect, what they are saying is that the credit card credentials or data now from 1st January 2022 can only be held either by issuer banks or by card networks. Nobody else can have that credit card data. As in, they have some exception that you can have the first four digits for recon, etc. But the card details will not be available. So just to correlate that to subscription, in effect, not only do you have to do the song and dance of the AFA, you will also very soon not be able to store the card data. And you will have to move to what is called a tokenization solution, uh, which also is a good solution, good for customers. But the general, what I hear from clients is that the system is not ready. Even people who are saying we are live, because you require four or five different ecosystem participants to be ready for tokenization to really happen. And so that's another area where people are pushing for a extended deadline. But the point I'm making, it's a bit of a double whammy, because you need the AFA, you also need the tokenization done to be able to collect on your subscriptions on an ongoing basis.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm just thinking about it. There's major disruption, and one of the things that you cited was it was not really a problem to solve for, basis a minority. Then why are we solving for it? Because there's huge disruptions. Like the companies are losing 70 odd percent of their subscription, base because of this. And honestly, the subscription model gives wings to the B2C sort of aspect, the B2 small b aspect, which are huge volumes and affect sentiment. And then people are thinking about how now do I process it. The whole thing is to make it easy to use. And now it's not really solving for that ease of use when you look at what you just said. So how do you see that play out?
That's a good question, Arjun, because I was talking to also some clients I advise on the issuing side, and I've asked them how has it played out after. So the irony is that this was to solve for, to benefit customers, right, as in
Yeah.
to make it safer for customers, etc. But the irony is when he kind of told me now it is stabilized in a few months for large merchants at least. The first from October 1, they've received a record number of customer complaints because of fall-offs and because they can't get into their Netflix account or wherever they want to go. And in effect, it's led to us, at least a short-term spike in consumer complaints. And now I think they are looking to stabilize it. The other argument really for why this whole thing was a problem that didn't exist and why it's overly prescriptive is, and this is just to take a parallel that, when you have a de minimis of 5,000, especially for doing, I can do as many under 5,000 transactions I want on a live basis without any additional factor of authentication,
Okay.
without a cap. So if I am pre-agreeing and telling somebody to, please store my details or let me agree now that I want to
Mhm.
do 5,000 on a recurring basis, the argument is that if you anyway made it de minimis by capping it at 5,000, and that's the amount you feel that is mitigates the risk, then there's no need for this circular at all.
No, no, that's there definitely an argument. But think about the disruption that has been caused even for businesses to function, where startups, for instance, like myself, run on these payments to different service providers, and suddenly we're looking at things falling and dropping off the core product as services not working. And the outcome is horrendous, right? I mean, I have large enterprise customers, and they complain saying this is not working, and we got to go and fix all of this, and it just adds a layer of effort to the process that already was seemingly well oiled. And I'm just going to shift gears. And Parthiban, you know that India is now sort of booming into being one of the SaaS forces to reckon with. And the payment module, that you are core to developing from Chargebee's side, what you're close to, and our payment by subscription sort of impact to the world, because we can go get a community outside, a
Hmm.
global consumer base outside, a global customer base outside. We're facing a lot of these challenges, and I see it as a growth challenge, not something so easily said to it will be cured. You have to wait for time to settle. What is that time to settle when you have created more wheels within wheels?
Sure, Arjun. Okay, let me introduce myself. I'm Parthiban. I work as a senior product manager for Chargebee. So I've been with Chargebee for close to 4 years now. I'm leading the payments module, which is one of the core modules of Chargebee and the recurring billing module itself. Before that, I was with Axis Bank working in the product domain. So that's how I started into this payment domain itself. And with Chargebee, I've been working with a lot of international global payment gateways and payment methods across the world, helping our customers expand globally and collect recurring payments. Uh, yeah, I'll come to that point, Arjun. Just before that, I just want to touch upon whatever Gautam said. I just want to add few more thoughts on that before we move on to the probably the global. How do we see this from a global perspective?
Sure.
So okay, so I think Gautam made it really clear in terms of what all things are there as per the RBI's notifications. There are a lot more requirements around it, and like Gautam was also mentioning, when we think about payments, it's just not about the issuing side or on the merchant side or the acquiring side. There are a lot of players in between this whole ecosystem which enables this payment. Let it be processors, aggregators, card networks. There are a lot more players in between this whole ecosystem, and all of these players are continuously working on this RBI mandate related changes. Some of them are ready, some of them are still on the process of implementing it. So from a customer standpoint also, so they don't really have the full solution ready at this point in time from a market standpoint. So like Gautam was mentioning, one area or one current workaround that they have with which they can manage all of this is by making their customers come back online and putting in an OTP or password to complete the payment, because there is no limit. Like Gautam was mentioning, there is no limit to it. The limit is only applicable for automated recurring payments which are less than 5k, where you want to, let's say you want to collect payment without even a customer's intervention on a periodical basis. That's where the limit is applicable. But let's say if your customer is ready to come back online and they're ready to put in a password or OTP to complete payment, that means you can collect the payment. So if at all the customer is also willing and you also want to collect the payment, that is one avenue that I think all companies will have to make sure there are ways in which at least their customers can come back online and pay for it. And similarly, I think one more aspect I think the companies will also have to make sure is they have a proper dunning management or way to follow up with the customers in an automated manner, because like you said, there are payment failures already happening because of this, and a lot of business are affected. So they'll have to make sure that they have an effective way in which they can reach out to their customers in an automated manner, remind them and help them come back online and pay for those dues. So yeah.
Again, going back to the problem that we are not solving and creating a layer of this, process that requires us to interact with our customers better and sort of bring them back, as well as automate it so it's continuous, because you've just created a bit of a wall for the customers to jump, which is crazy, right? You're trying to create ease of access. So
Yeah.
isn't this an inhibition in the first place?
Yeah, I think like we discussed, I think this is going to be a short-term pain point till customers on the whole market gets used to this kind of a setup. But I think long term, this is going to increase a lot of confidence from the customers. There are more people who are going to come online and transact online, which is going to benefit the overall ecosystem itself. Almost all businesses are going to benefit from that. But definitely, there is going to be a short-term pain in which we'll have to companies will have to make sure they're able to set this context with their customers and then come back online and pay for it. Because this automated right now with this new RBI regulation, within less than 5k, even if you're able to set up a mandate. So even if you want to set up a mandate, the banks will have to be ready with their solution. So not all issuers are still, I think, still in the process of, some issuers are still in the process of implementing the mandate solution. So that mandate, you'll have to set, that's only for less than 5k. That you can do in an automated manner. But if it's more than 5k, some intervention of the customer is required for you to complete the payment.
No, so I see that certainly that there is this intervention that has charged up or fired up from all sides to make sure that we are securing things, and it's also a confidence building exercise. So do other global markets have these kind of regulations, and why not? They don't.
Absolutely, Arjun. So if you think about it, actually, there are a recent regulation that came up in Europe is something called PSD2, or strong customer authentication, which is also very similar to what we are doing right now in India. It's about implementing an additional factor authentication, which will have to be completed the first time, but your recurring payments can go through without an additional factor authentication. So the only difference is the limit. In Europe, currently there is no limit, and there are a few other ways in which actually businesses can better deal with it. Let's say both the parties have confidence. Let's say the customer is also willing to say, I don't want, I trust your business. I want to make sure your payments are going through absolutely. There are ways in which you can actually whitelist a business to your bank and say, I don't want to complete AFA for this business because I trust this business. I can make payment for those businesses. So there are a few other opportunities available with which I think the business can deal with those scenarios in a different way. But
Yeah.
I think slowly these regulations are coming up in other areas also. It's just not in India.
Yeah, and I guess some people will take advantage of that to make it easy to get past that point, and then you'll have like a rating system, because somebody will find out that the person that they whitelisted was not on the level, and then you'll have to go back. I think it's
Yeah.
going to create that as well, which is from a confidence building exercise from a long term standpoint. I certainly believe that there is value in it. How it's structured and the readiness to deploy was one question. I think we're still answering that. It's like jumping into it and then trying to figure it out at some level. I think the question that I want to come back to is that how does it affect our ability to go out and tap into the global market with this being regulatory structure that we have to observe, and what does that do for our aspirations to continue to tap into the global consumer market?
Okay, let me take a stab at it. Maybe Gautam can add on how the structuring of the companies and all of it. Okay, so I think we are already seeing a lot of bigger players out there who've been able to do this successfully. We know Zoho, Freshtest, and there are a lot more companies who are probably reached a stage where they've successfully shown this as a model that can be adopted. There are a lot of, I think, there are a lot of other companies that are probably following the path and growing steadily and reaching to that stage. There are a lot of companies like BrowserStack, Chargebee, Zenoti, there are Kissflow. I think we can just go on and on. So there are a lot of companies who are actually, when they're launching the product itself, it's being launched for the global market. It's just not constrained with any country or anything like that. So that's the avenue that is coming up now. There is a lot of traction on this kind of a setup as well. But like you said, there are obviously going to be, when they're expanding to different markets, there are obviously going to be certain nuances of this market. Let it be taxation, or let it be payment regulations, or even other GDPR like kind of privacy regulations. So uh, there are going to be, I think, market specific things that the companies will have to deal with. That's where I think the solutions like Chargebee, who are able to solve for this on a global scale and help those companies grow globally is what is going to help. So they don't have to do all of this on their own. There are a lot of solutions out there with which they can easily manage these and more. I think talking about this is just not about Chargebee. Even the payment, if you think about from a payment gateway standpoint or a payment service provider standpoint, there are a lot of global gateways who are ready to provide local acquiring. That means you can process payments locally as if you have an entity set up there and you process locally. They're able to provide that kind of a setup and probably settle it in whichever currency that you ask for. So those kind of interesting opportunities are also come up. Yeah, I think the only point that I want to say is, yeah, there are going to be certain things that the companies will have to deal with, but there are solutions out there. They don't have to do all of this on their own.
Absolutely. So people are going to have to get creative, and it's sort of disrupting
Yeah.
the norm right now. Gautam, what do you see as some of the structural changes that you have seen people succeed with in the past? Some things that you can observe are going to accelerate in the future basis this?
Sure. So I think in terms of not staying with only the negative and looking at the positive, I think what we've seen at least, and more in terms of advising on transactions, because we're not in industry, but what we've seen is that ultimately I think it's well acknowledged that India is a powerhouse of talent, and I think Indian SaaS is going global is a fact. What we end up seeing. Uh, is there are a lot of companies now that have global aspirations, born in India but looking to do business in various geographies. Some of them, in terms of what Parthiban was referring to, and not to get into too much detail on it, but ultimately, to have a genuinely global business, there are various different structures that people adopt. Whether if it was founded in India and then a foreign holding company where the private equity sits, etc. Many of those are workable and they work. I think the only thing in general for a company looking to go global in that fashion, or looking to flip their company from India to overseas, for whatever advantages that are there, you just have to be a little mindful from a RBI foreign exchange regulation perspective that it's being done in a manner that is kosher, there's no round tripping, etc. But we keep encountering, especially in the context of investment deals, a lot of SaaS players who are operating in multiple geographies, doing superbly well, achieving great valuations, and are very often based on this offshore holdco structure where they raise the money. So that was one. I think just coming back to the specific regulation, and one area that we've been advising on, and it's interesting how it's playing out, is, as Parthiban mentioned, you have a lot of offshore merchants as well. So this is the reverse, where you have offshore SaaS players who are offering let's say a virus software, antivirus software, anything like that to Indian consumers. All of them also operated on this subscription model, and very often they have global processors who don't know who RBI is or what they've written. So, but the point is, what we hear is that when the transaction is coming to the issuing bank without any of these bells and whistles, they are being rejected. So
Correct.
the what I have heard is that a lot of these offshore software companies that market in India are now looking, although they have global processors, which is not it's not working for this recurring payment model. So they are now looking to tie up with big name aggregators or local processors, so they are able to meet with these guidelines. Because as Parthiban said, there are cross-border, payment players who do, and it could be a combination who do, payments and payouts in any currency, and they operate across multiple geographies. But they would also have to eventually use one of these payment processors who kind of trying to solve for the problem. So couple of the large payment aggregators, so whether it's Razorpay, BillDesk, etc., they have been, I think, at the forefront of the regulation, uh, and they have created solutions to try to solve the problem and ease the problem. So, because just to explain it a bit, ultimately you need connectivity with all the issuing banks, and
Correct.
that's really the point. Because the customer that comes to a subscription service, he might have a HDFC card, he may have Access card, he may have ICICI card, it could be anything. So, the idea, and some of these solutions that we've been seeing, like SI Hub or Mandate HQ, etc. I
Correct.
think the problem they're trying to solve is both for both accounts, tokenization as well as this, by connect having that connectivity or bridge with the various issues. But as I said earlier, I don't think we can at this stage say everything is working like absolutely smoothly. The It will take some amount of hiccups before we get there, and hopefully we do get there.
So at one level, does it force, I mean, not force, at least force your mindset to think about flipping and moving to structures that promote sort of ease of localized selling?
So I think those are different considerations. I don't think at least the RBI directions of and in themselves will change anything in terms of those mindsets. Where we've kind of at least had experience with people looking at any of this is really from the perspective of ease of investing and returning capital, uh, the potential of an offshore listing, and ease of mul- expanding into multiple geographies without a very tight foreign exchange regime. So I think from a foreign exchange law perspective, we are still don't have capital account convertibility fully, and it is in that sense still a fairly protective regime. So those are the use cases, and those are the reasons why we've seen some companies, both in SaaS as well as the fintech world, look at offshore vehicles
Yeah.
as a
So,
primary thing.
no, and I agree. I think, you talked about Mandate HQ and Sci-Hub. I think one is the germination or the sort of creation of the wire media to deal with this. I mean, you see that, like you said, HDFC and Access Builders can raise a pay, sort of launching recurring payment platforms. You also have, payment aggregators and payment gateways, PAPG guidelines that are being released, right? So there are various things that are coming across, and I think the human brain is quite creative to figure out paths forward. Uh, in one sense, as we go through this journey, you're seeing a lot of momentum in terms of the payment by subscription model, and also the question that I have, Parthiban, for you is that as you see it, and this is a point of view, it's not just generally from where you come and what you're doing right now, but looking at the SaaS, business model, we also see enterprises who are used to doing total contract value and observing discounts coming in and saying that they are willing to buy on a monthly recurring model basis at large volumes.
Mhm.
uh, that, in my opinion, was something that was very difficult to change, starting our company Edge in 2012 and getting into a monthly recurring model, went into an annual recurring revenue model because they talked in that language, and I deal with large enterprises. So that, I'm seeing a mindset shift What do you see that to be when you're looking at it across delivering this model? I mean, obviously not from a global consumer base. I'm just talking from a global consumer base, which is enterprise. Do you see that shifting in the way they would buy in large volumes?
Um, okay, so I think yeah, there are definitely companies looking at creative ways of how do they manage their cash flows. So why should they give all of the cash upfront versus paying it in different installments? So they are even okay to sign an agreement, but they may want to pay for it on a monthly basis. You may have different clauses and all of it, but yeah, that kind of a mindset is already there. People are looking at creative ways in which they're solving for it. But the other thing is also that it's just not on the other extreme spectrum. If you think about it, even on the other end of the spectrum, nowadays even toothbrushes and toothpaste are getting into subscriptions, which could be like
Oh.
20 rupees, 30 rupees. So
Mhm.
this kind of a mindset is happening across. It's just not on the higher end, it's also on the lower end.
Sure.
If you go to Amazon, like you get to see a lot of small subscriptions as well. So I think the long term perspective is that things are getting into this kind of a mode across the board. We'll have to see how do we try and solve for over this entire spectrum.
Yeah, and I believe at one level, this sort of rent versus buy sort of model, through the service for a period in time that you're familiar with it or you want it, is also a factor of the Gen Z and the millennial, the nature of the customer base, right? Their buying patterns and their attachment to things over long term versus short term. I think you
Mm.
see that even in car buying patterns or house buying patterns at this time. So I think the subscription model is gaining momentum also by the nature of the buyer. The other side where I do struggle is, where the value of, enterprise buying continues to say, listen, I like your monthly recurring revenue model, but I want to talk about the 3 years that we contract and observe a discount for it and just finish off with it. And that's so predictable outflow is measured. So that cracking that seems to be still a challenge. And I know a lot of the subscription-based models, when they deal with enterprise customers and they have the tailwinds of the small and medium business, they get the monthly recurring model pat down. But this still seems to be an outlier that is dealt with as an outlier, and it subscribes to a great amount of the company's revenue. So I think there's still a challenge there, in my view, and I'm seeing that the mindset of what you just talked about is the consumer base buying patterns. When literally, and as simple things as buying toothpaste generally forces people into thinking about the job that they represent. They might be in a procurement team and they might be influencing a buying pattern that's very different. So I see that. I think that's valuable. What do you think also in terms of, and Gautam, you could answer this, is in terms of, you're seeing a lot of the companies that are coming up in terms of models, and I'm sure you're seeing M&A effects also coming in. uh, in terms of subscription based models, the theme of our conversation is it's here to stay. Is it a given because of the way we think in our daily lives as a community? Is that going to be the next frontier to live with?
No, I think certainly, and I think we focused a bit on the one limited spectrum of the D2C 5,000 rupees a pop type of subscription model, and why that regulation is so good, bad and ugly. But I think the point is that as an overall theme across sectors, we are seeing adoption of the subscription model. And as you say, and this might be a unconnected tangent, but ultimately the consumer mindset, whether you look at BNPL subscription or anything of that sort, the point is if you can defer a payment or pay less on a monthly basis or recurring basis, and across use cases, it's a good model to have. So here, I think just to put this in the larger context, this payment by subscription is certainly here to stay and will do very well. I think the point that we focused on is a pinpoint of where from the D2C play, because of the RBI guidelines, currently there are some hiccups.
Mhm.
But there are various other ways to solve for it where the payment occurs, especially currently with 5,000, it's not really sustainable for the enterprise buying that you spoke of. So there are various different methods and various solutions on the payment side, whether it's a collect now product that various the big banks offer, and others, where the payment for an enterprise buyer can be made very seamless. Just won't be recurring and automatic. So uh, I I don't think this circular of itself takes away from the model or the overall uh, positivity around the subscription model. I think the idea is more that you need to get creative around payments, and if you are D2C, then you have to go through this temporary pain of getting the AFAs in place and tokenization in place.
Yeah, I think the pain is where the volumes are in terms of the number of transactions. I think where the mindset shift is, and clearly it's not an impediment, is where the B2B software as a service for enterprises. I think that still continues to leverage conversations and associated payment methods which are not affected by this regulation, to be honest. I think that's the more trivial or the smaller problem, but I think the larger problem, as we've all debated today, is around the impact to the consumer, impact to the business that's rendering the service, talking about the ecosystem that's being created to govern it as well as facilitate it. I think there's a lot of promise there, and I think as we are eternal optimists, we always look at the brighter side, and that's the way to go. I think the challenge is fielding some of this and channeling it into methods that will probably foster different business models. So I think in terms of this closing out and comments there, I know that we have sort of a time challenge because we are overshooting. But keeping that in mind, I think one of the things that I would like as a closing comment from each one of you is, if you look at the payment model, you look at the subscription based model, you look at India and where we are coming from in terms of building businesses that really classify as world class businesses. I think SaaS has given us a sense of that freedom and the unlocking of potential. What do you think, as a closing comment, would be your point of view on that? Maybe Parthiban, you can start on the promise of world class from India.
Uh, Definitely, Arjun. Like I said, I think there are a lot of services and products coming out from India, which are actually being sold globally and being used by a lot of enterprises, and we are seeing a lot of momentum from that angle. So I think even from I think the recent hiccups that we are seeing, maybe over a period of time, maybe when there are more data available, maybe the banks and RBI will look at how they can expand further the limits, or maybe come up with creative solutions for B2B kind of a segment. For in order for the companies also to motivate them and then take them to the next level of growth path, because that kind of a if let's say that kind of a support is there, definitely I think there is a lot of opportunity available globally, because with SaaS coming in, and I think we already have, like Gautam was mentioning, we already have a lot of talents available, quality talents available. So there are a lot of creative, interesting products that are already out there in the market, and there are a lot of already other products that are getting built. So I think the potential available is definitely huge.
Yeah, and I certainly think that product thinking and product management itself has gone to another level, right? Coming from India, where it was maybe even 5 years ago. So I'm just seeing that ripple effect of a lot of the companies that have seeded great product thinking, great entrepreneurs, great a sense of product fundamental building skills that are just far different from what it was. I think there's a complete, uh, you know, 4x, 5x jump in that kind of velocity of thinking, quality of outcome, UX, UI. I think there's great
Correct.
value there. Um, Gautam, from a closing comment perspective, just going with the theme of world class from India and seeing that India is booming, we've doubled the amount of investment. I think $40 billion came into the country this year, and close to double, or if not double, the investment that we had last year. What do you think is moving the ticker for us here?
Yeah, so to strike an optimistic note, Arjun, I think to end, I think what at least we are seeing, and I think everyone's seeing, the joke is that every street in Bangalore is a unicorn or potential unicorn guy sitting there. So I think things are going in that sense. The at least the payment in the payments world, the kind of companies and models coming out of India are fantastic. We are seeing, if we done a Series C round at X, we are seeing a Series D round at 2x or 3x, and we said what happened in 3 months. But ultimately, I think there's a lot of excitement. There are some great founders, and to also from the RBI perspective, while this may have been a miss, ultimately they are a fantastic regulator from the perspective of knowing what's occurring. So while it's not completely connected, but if you look at the working group on digital lending, and separately, this is not RBI but Niti Aayog, their digital banking proposal. I think the general theme is that a lot of these models will, become mainstream, come into some amount of regulation, and I think the message from the regulators, we want large scale innovation. We are very happy with various, whether it's the BNPL models or the other lending type models. They want some certain customer safeguards, but ultimately they are looking for innovation, whether it's onshore payments, cross border payments. The sandbox recently was on cross border payments. So it's a very exciting place to be. India as a payments hub, and things are innovating and changing every day. So this is a minor hiccup. I don't see this playing a major role, and we should see a lot of innovative payment solutions coming through.
Great to see the optimism and the future thinking. Now, obviously, the optimism is based with a lot of realism in your case, primarily because you're seeing it in the guts of it. I know you have stalwarts who represent the payments sector also within your business. So, Gautam from AZB and Partners, thank you so much for participating. Thanks for giving your straight and narrow your lens to what payments by subscription and its continuity is all about. And Parthiban, coming from the product end of it, coming from Chargebee, and coming from the fact that the unicorns are on every street in Chennai now. I think we have a to bow to that. So thank you so much for your participation. Thank you for your lens and your point of view, and also the clarity that you brought to this conversation. It was great talking to you guys and being on this session. So to many more successes, and hope we see this through to make sure that many models of business are built out of this new challenge. Thank you so much, guys.